I unzipped my suitcase for the third time, certain I'd find them tucked beneath the folded blouses or hidden under the lining of my shoes. I could almost hear the rattle of the little orange bottles in my head, the way they'd always sounded against one another when I dropped them into the side pocket back home. But they weren't here. Not in the suitcase, not in the drawers, not anywhere in the small cabin that now felt more like a cage than a cozy retreat. I pressed my palms into the bedspread, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. My medication wasn't something I could afford to misplace. The pills were the difference between calm control and the tightening, suffocating panic of my chest seizing when it pleased. I had taken them every day since the night my husband collapsed beside me on the sofa. That was 5 years ago, and in all that time I had never once forgotten. Daniel had been there while I packed. He'd leaned against the doorway with that little smile, the one that always carried a touch of impatience beneath it. He'd watched as I set the bottles in the side pocket, and he'd even zipped it shut for me. "Relax, Mom," he'd said. "You're about to have the trip of your life." Now sitting on the edge of the cruise cabin bed, my heart thudding too fast for comfort, those words twisted sharp inside me. I tried calling him. The signal flickered, then died. All I heard was the echo of his voicemail. "You've reached Daniel. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." I hung up before the beep. I didn't trust myself not to scream into the line. I told myself to think clearly, calmly, like my husband used to when I'd panic about the bills or the car or any of the 1,000 small things that made up a family life. But no matter how I pressed my thoughts into order, the same question rose again and again. Where were my pills? I checked my purse, my coat pockets, even the little bathroom shelves lined with miniature soaps and lotions. Empty. The small square of the cabin seemed to close in tighter with every drawer I opened and shut. Outside the window, the ocean stretched black and endless, the hum of the ship vibrating through the walls like the heartbeat of something alive. Someone knocked once at the door across the hall, a laugh trailing off into silence. The cheer of it felt cruel. I hadn't come on this ship to panic, but panic was what I had now. I forced myself to sit back against the pillows and breathe. Maybe I'd left them at home. Maybe they were still in the bathroom cabinet where I kept the spare bottles. Daniel had said he'd double-check everything for me. He'd insisted. He'd even joked, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm not sending you out there to die." It hadn't felt like a joke now that I replayed it. The phone blinked with a single bar of service. I tried Claire. My daughter-in-law always answered quickly. This time the call rang until it went silent. No message. No word. My chest tightened again, not the full grip of fear, but the warning twinge that said my body was not forgiving. I pressed a hand against it, willing it to ease. The cabin suddenly seemed too quiet. I heard the faint roll of the ship cutting water, the muted laughter of strangers down the hall, the clink of glasses somewhere far away. Everything ordinary, but wrong. I sat there with the empty suitcase beside me and thought about Daniel's eyes, how he'd avoided mine when he pressed the ticket into my hand. He'd said I deserved to chill, a gift, a surprise. He'd hugged me perfunctory and stiff as if he were completing a duty. Claire had stood just behind him, her smile fragile, her hands clasped, and when I looked at her, she'd looked away. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was imagining. Maybe the pills had slipped into some corner I hadn't searched yet. I stood, opened the suitcase again, and began pulling everything out onto the bedspread. Blouses, tumbled shoes, thudded scarves, slid. No pills. Not one bottle. My hands curled tight around the sheets. The knock came soft this time at my own door. I froze, the air catching in my throat. Slowly I went to the door and cracked it. A woman stood there, perhaps a little younger than me, her dark hair streaked with silver eyes, sharp in a face that carried too many stories. She held a book against her chest. "Sorry," she said, voice low. "You dropped this earlier." She held out a bookmark with the ship's logo. It wasn't mine. I shook my head. Not me. She studied me for a moment longer than courtesy, allowed her gaze flicking over my face, maybe seeing the tremor in my hands or the way my breath hitched. Then she nodded. "Well, if you ever need anything, I'm across the hall. Name's Ruth." I thanked her and shut the door. My heart pounded harder. I sat back down on the bed and stared at the scattered clothes. Daniel's words echoed distorted, hollow, "Relax, Mom. Enjoy the trip. It was supposed to be a gift, but right then it felt like a trap. The next morning I forced myself out of bed with a headache that had nothing to do with seasickness. The sun slid through the cabin window, a stripe of gold against the carpet, too cheerful for how I felt. My suitcase still lay half unpacked on the floor, the blouses and shoes scattered like evidence of my own carelessness. But I wasn't careless. I had packed my medication. Daniel had been there. He'd zipped the pocket himself. The ache in my chest pulsed like a warning. I couldn't waste another hour pretending I'd overlooked the bottles. I needed answers. The ship's medical office was tucked near the mid-deck past the spa and gym, the places where smiling tourists lined up in towels with cucumber water in hand. I walked slower than usual, one hand brushing the railing, steadying myself against the faint roll of the ocean. Every step echoed with the thought, what if I have an episode out here? What if no one believes me? The nurse at the desk greeted me with a practiced smile, the kind that belonged more to customer service than healthcare. I explained about my medication, about how I'd packed it, about how it was missing. Her expression softened into pity, but her words stayed crisp. "We can check the system, Mrs. Lawson. Do you know the exact prescription?" I gave her the name. She typed quickly, nails clicking against the keyboard. Then she frowned. "I'm sorry there's no record of this in your medical file. Did you submit your documents before boarding?" "Yes," I said firmly. "My son filled them out for me. He said he gave everything to the cruise line." She hesitated, then gestured toward the inner office. "You should speak with the doctor." The doctor looked younger than I expected, early 40s, hair trimmed short, a clean white coat that smelled faintly of antiseptic. He shook my hand warmly, too warmly, as if rehearsed. "Mrs. Lawson, I understand you're missing your medication." "Yes, I packed 2 bottles myself. I need them daily. The nurse says you don't have any record." He glanced at his screen lips tightening in what could have been sympathy or disinterest. "Unfortunately, I don't see anything here either. We can provide general substitutes, but without documentation." "No." My voice came out sharper than I intended. "These aren't optional. They're prescribed for a reason." He nodded slowly, eyes flicking down at his papers. For a moment I swore I saw something there, a form with my name before he covered it with his hand. "I understand, Mrs. Lawson. But for now, the best advice is rest. Enjoy the amenities. Sometimes stress can cause us to misplace things." Stress, misplace. The words clanged in my head. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Doctor, I didn't misplace them. They were in my luggage. Someone removed them." He offered that same polite smile, the one that said he wasn't going to help me. "If you'd like, I can prescribe something for anxiety. Many passengers find the adjustment difficult." I stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "No, thank you." The corridor outside felt colder than it should. My legs trembled, but I pushed myself forward away from the smell of antiseptic, away from the doctor's even tone. The ship's hum grew louder in my ears, like a reminder of where I was surrounded by water, dependent on the crew cut off from anyone who might believe me. "Mrs. Lawson." I turned. Across the hall, Ruth Delgado stood leaning against the wall book in hand again. Her eyes weren't casual this time. They were searching. "Are you all right?" she asked. I opened my mouth to lie to say yes, but my throat tightened. Something in her gaze made me pause. "No," I whispered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I thought so. You looked pale last night. And today, well, I know that look." "What look?" I asked, wary. The look of someone realizing a gift isn't a gift at all. The words struck me harder than she could know. My mouth went dry. "Why would you say that?" Her lips pressed together, and she glanced around as if afraid of being overheard. "Because I've seen it before. You're not the first woman I've met on a ship like this traveling because someone else thought it was best for her, someone who stood to gain from her absence." Her words crawled over me like ice. I tried to laugh, but the sound broke in my throat. "You don't know my son." "No," she agreed softly. "But I know desperation. I know what it looks like when a family member wants you out of the way." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The ship's walls felt closer, pressing against my shoulders. "You think my son—" She shrugged, but her eyes stayed fixed on mine. "I think you'd better keep your eyes open, and if you need someone to listen, I'm across the hall." She walked away, then her book clutched tight, leaving me rooted to the floor. I made it back to my cabin, somehow shutting the door with more force than I meant to. The suitcase still lay open on the bed, a reminder of what I'd lost. I sank into the chair beside it, trembling. I wanted to believe Ruth was exaggerating. I wanted to believe the doctor had been honest, that Daniel had simply made a mistake, that my pills would turn up somewhere. But the image of the doctor's hand sliding over that piece of paper wouldn't leave me. He had something he didn't want me to see. And Ruth? How could she know, unless she was right? Unless others had boarded these cruises thinking they were vacations, only to realize too late they'd been sent away neatly, quietly, without a fight. I pressed my forehead to my hands, whispering into the silence, "Daniel, what have you done?" The ship groaned a long, low creak through the hull, as if answering me. I sat in the cabin for what felt like hours, staring at the neat rows of clothes I had finally forced myself to fold back into my suitcase. It was pointless. Folding couldn't quiet the pounding rhythm of my heart or the questions spinning in my head. The doctor's calm voice, Ruth's warning, Daniel's smile in the doorway back home, all of it played in loops I couldn't silence. When I finally reached for my phone again, I didn't call Daniel. The thought of hearing his voicemail message one more time was unbearable. Instead, I scrolled to Claire's name. My daughter-in-law had always been the buffer, the one who smoothed things over when Daniel grew impatient or clipped in his tone. Claire's smile never quite reached her eyes, but she tried. And when she married my son, I had believed she was exactly what he needed, someone soft, someone kind. The call rang twice, 3 times. My pulse jumped when the line connected, but no voice came, only silence. Then the soft click of disconnection. She hadn't said a word. I tried again. This time the call didn't even ring. It went straight to voicemail. My throat tightened. She had pressed the red button. She had chosen not to answer. I lowered the phone slowly, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. What was she afraid of? Or worse, what did she already know? A memory tugged at me unbidden. That night at dinner, when Daniel had pulled the glossy cruise brochure from his briefcase, laying it on the table as if it were a prize. 2 weeks, he'd said, on the ocean. "You need to relax, Mom." Claire had sat beside him, her hands clasped in her lap, her eyes down. I had laughed nervously, asked if she'd come with me. She'd murmured something about work, about how Daniel insisted I should go alone. At the time, I'd thought she looked relieved. Now the memory curdled. I rose from the bed, pacing the cabin, the ship's faint sway pulling me side to side like an unwanted dance. My chest felt tight again, not quite pain, but the kind of pressure that whispered, "You can't afford to wait." I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered into the silence, "Claire, please, tell me this isn't what I think it is." A knock startled me. I froze, waiting. It wasn't Ruth this time. When I opened the door, a steward stood holding a tray. "Compliments of the captain, ma'am," he said with a polite smile. "A glass of red wine, a plate of fruit." I stared at it, my stomach twisting. "I didn't order this." "No, ma'am," he said. "It's customary." I forced a smile, thanked him, and closed the door. The glass gleamed dark in the light, the wine almost black. I carried it to the small desk, set it down carefully, and didn't touch it. Not a sip. Back on the bed, I picked up my phone again and opened a new message to Claire. My hands shook as I typed, "Please, I don't feel safe. I think Daniel knows something. Call me." The little read notification blinked back almost instantly, but no reply came. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred, until the words seemed to blur and bend into something unrecognizable. My throat ached with a mixture of shame and fury. Shame for begging. Fury for the silence that answered me. Outside my cabin window, the ocean stretched endlessly. The sun was sliding down now, casting everything in orange fire. It should have been beautiful, but instead it felt like the horizon was closing over me, swallowing me whole. I thought about Daniel's laugh as he'd slipped the ticket into my hand, about Claire's stiff smile, about the way both of them had hugged me goodbye, brief, perfunctory, as if this weren't a departure but a dismissal. And then I thought about Ruth's eyes, sharp, and knowing when she said she'd seen this before. The phone buzzed in my palm. My heart leapt, but it was just a system notification from the ship, tonight's gala dinner, 7 p.m., Deck 5 ballroom. I let the phone drop onto the bedspread, its screen gone dark. The cabin's silence swallowed me whole. I told myself I wasn't going to cry. But the tears came anyway, hot and fast, slipping down my cheeks. I pressed my fists against my eyes, whispering through clenched teeth, "Not my son. Please, not my son." The ship gave a low, mournful groan as it shifted course as though answering me. The ballroom lights still glowed faintly in the corridor when I stepped out of my cabin the next morning, clutching my purse as if it were the last anchor holding me upright. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire's unreadable face, the unopened message, and the untouched wineglass gleaming in the lamplight like a warning. My chest ached a low throb that reminded me how fragile I was without my medication. I told myself not to panic, not here in the hallway where cheerful couples strolled hand in hand toward breakfast, their voices bright and careless. I kept walking head low past the shops selling seashell trinkets and the glass cases filled with jewelry I couldn't afford. I stopped at the guest services desk, my fingers tapping against the counter. A young woman in a navy blazer smiled at me, her voice chipper. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice, though I didn't know why. "I'd like to confirm my return flight. The ticket my son gave me, it should have included the round trip. Could you print the itinerary?" She typed briskly, nails clicking against the keys. The smile faltered just slightly as her eyes flicked to the screen. Then she smoothed it back into place. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your reservation is for a one-way voyage. No return flight is listed." I blinked. "No return." "That's correct. You're scheduled to disembark in Lisbon, Portugal. After that, travel arrangements would be your responsibility." Her words slid through me like a blade. Lisbon. I had never even thought of Portugal. Daniel had said nothing about it. A one-way voyage. "There must be some mistake," I whispered. I don't live in Lisbon. My home is in Maryland. My son booked this for me. Could you check again?" She offered a sympathetic tilt of the head, but her voice stayed firm. "I've double-checked, ma'am. I'm afraid there's nothing else listed. Would you like me to assist with purchasing a return flight?" My knees wavered and I gripped the edge of the counter. "I don't have access to my bank accounts here. My son. He told me everything was taken care of." "I'm very sorry," she said softly, the kind of sorry that meant the conversation was over. I stumbled back from the desk, my throat tight. The hum of the ship roared in my ears louder than before. One way. To Portugal. Not home. Not ever if Daniel's smile had meant what I was beginning to fear. The hallway swam around me. I pressed against the wall, closing my eyes, fighting the dizziness. Passengers brushed past, laughing, sipping coffee, carrying shopping bags. No one saw me. No one cared. A hand touched my arm. I flinched. "It's true, isn't it?" Ruth's voice. I opened my eyes to see her standing there, concern etched across her features. They said, "It's a one-way," I whispered. She nodded as if she'd expected it. "That's what I feared." I searched her face. "Why would my son do this? Why send me across the ocean with no way back?" Ruth hesitated, then steered me toward a quieter alcove near the stairwell. "Listen carefully. Sometimes families arrange things. Sometimes they say it's for care or a fresh start. But really it's exile. They send someone away where they can't come back. You're not the first I've seen like this." Her words pressed against my chest like a weight. Exile. A fresh start. I thought of Daniel's voice. "Relax, Mom. Enjoy the trip." My stomach turned. "I need to call him," I said desperately, fumbling with my phone. The signal flickered again, teasing me with one bar, then vanishing. Ruth caught my hand gently. "Even if you reach him, do you think he'll tell you the truth? Think about Claire's silence. Think about the missing pills. This isn't an accident." My breath caught. She was right. Every piece lined up now in a terrible pattern I hadn't wanted to see. Missing medication, no return ticket, Claire's avoidance, the doctor hiding paperwork. My son wanted me gone. The words echoed inside me until they became a drumbeat. My son, my only child. The boy I had raised after his father died, the boy I'd sacrificed every spare dollar for, the boy I'd stayed up nights helping through homework, through heartbreak, through all the little storms of youth. The boy who had stood in my kitchen 2 weeks ago and smiled as he pressed a one-way ticket into my hand. I staggered back against the wall. "I don't believe it," I said, though the tears stung my eyes. He wouldn't. Ruth's gaze softened. Sometimes love blinds us, but love doesn't erase the truth. I turned away, pressing a hand to my mouth, trying not to sob aloud in the middle of the corridor. Passengers passed us without a glance, as if we were invisible, as if my world hadn't just collapsed. I whispered into my palm, "What have I done to deserve this?" No answer came. Only the endless hum of the ship carrying me further from home, further from safety, further into the trap my son had set. The sea outside my cabin window was calm, flat as glass. You would think that calm might steady me, but instead it unsettled me. The ocean's silence was too large, too empty, as if it were swallowing sound itself. I hadn't left my cabin since the encounter at guest services. I couldn't bring myself to. Every corner of the ship felt like a stage built to distract me from the truth. The laughter drifting from the pool deck, the chatter in the hallways, the announcements about onboard trivia nights, all of it clashed against the drumbeat inside my head, one-way ticket. I sat at the desk staring at the glass of red wine the steward had left me the day before. It still sat untouched, catching the light, a jewel of suspicion. I thought of Daniel's voice, "Relax, Mom. Enjoy the trip. A gift. No return." A knock at the door startled me. My heart raced until I heard Ruth's voice. "It's me. Are you all right?" I opened the door reluctantly. Ruth stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. She offered one, her face gentle, but her eyes sharp as ever. "You shouldn't stay shut away," she said softly. "Isolation feeds fear." I took the cup, my hands trembling. What if fear is the only thing keeping me alive? We sat on the small couch. Ruth sipped her coffee, then lowered her voice. "I overheard something last night. Some of the crew were talking near the service corridor. Your son's name came up." My breath caught. "Daniel." She nodded. "They mentioned a man, Lawson. American, mid-30s, owes money, big money. They said he'd been making arrangements. One of them joked that it was clever letting someone else pay his debts." The coffee turned sour in my mouth. I set the cup down before I dropped it. "No, he wouldn't. He's successful. He has a good job." Ruth's gaze was steady. "Does he tell you he does?" I swallowed, hard memories rushing in uninvited. The night I found bills shoved behind the couch cushions, the phone calls Daniel took in the garage, his voice low, urgent. The way he avoided my eyes when I asked about the new car he suddenly couldn't afford. The time I offered to help with rent, and he snapped that he didn't need charity. I had believed him. I had wanted to. The truth now stung like salt in an open wound. Ruth leaned forward, her hand light on mine. "I know what it feels like. My brother once signed me into a nursing facility I hadn't agreed to, said it was temporary, said it was for my good. I didn't see until too late that what he wanted was my inheritance." Her voice cracked just slightly, but she steadied it. "Don't think you're alone in this. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." Tears blurred my vision. "But he's my son," I whispered. "I raised him. My voice broke. I loved him." Ruth squeezed my hand. "Love and betrayal live side by side more often than we want to admit." The room spun around me. I pressed my fist against my chest, trying to breathe. The weight of truth was heavier than I had imagined. Daniel, my Daniel, had debts, had motives, had reasons to see me gone. All those years of sacrifice, the nights I worked late shifts, the dinners I skipped so he could eat better, the dreams I gave up so his could flourish, all of it crushed beneath the possibility that to him I was nothing more than an obstacle. I stared at the untouched wine on the desk. If what you say is true, then I'm already living on borrowed time. "Not borrowed," Ruth said firmly. "Taken, unless you fight for it back." Her words struck me like a lifeline thrown across deep water. For the first time I felt something other than fear. I felt anger. I wiped my eyes roughly. "He thinks he's clever. He thinks I'll go quietly." Ruth's mouth curved into the smallest of smiles. "Then don't." For a long time I sat in silence, listening to the ship's hum beneath my feet, the sound of laughter from the hallway, the endless ocean just beyond the wall. A mother's heart doesn't stop loving overnight, but something else had awakened in me, something sharper. The veil of trust had lifted, and in its place, a new resolve settled heavy in my bones. Daniel wanted me gone, but I wasn't gone yet. The corridors smelled faintly of polish and perfume when I forced myself back toward the medical office. I had promised myself after the last visit that I wouldn't go back, that his empty smiles and condescending tone were too much for me to endure again. But Ruth's words had been gnawing at me ever since Fight for Your Time Back. If I was going to survive, I needed proof. The nurse looked startled when I appeared at the counter, as though she hadn't expected me to return. "Mrs. Lawson, do you need something?" "Yes," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to see the doctor again." She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the office door. "He's in with another patient right now. Perhaps later this afternoon, no." The word came out sharper than I intended. Now. The pause stretched, but finally she rose and disappeared through the door. I folded my hands on the counter, though my fingers itched to tremble. The hum of the engines vibrated beneath the floor, a constant reminder of how far I was from land, from safety. The doctor emerged a moment later, his smile unchanged, as if nothing had happened between us. "Mrs. Lawson, what a surprise. Did you find your medication?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You know I didn't. I want to see the file you have on me." He blinked, feigning confusion. "Your file? Yes. Yesterday, when you looked at the screen, you covered it with your hand. I saw my name on the paper beneath it." "Show me." His smile tightened. "Mrs. Lawson, I think you may be misremembering." Stress, perhaps. Adjusting to a new environment, I slammed my hand against the counter before I even realized I'd done it. The sound startled even me, sharp and loud against the sterile walls. "Don't you dare dismiss me. I know what I saw." The nurse shifted uncomfortably behind him, her eyes darting to the floor. For 1 second I thought she might speak, but the doctor's glance silenced her. "I understand this must be upsetting," he said smoothly. "Why don't we schedule you for a relaxation therapy session?" Many of our guests find it helps with anxiety. The room swayed around me, not from the ship's motion, but from the sheer audacity of his words. Relaxation therapy, as if a scented candle could replace the pills that kept my heart steady. I drew myself up, squaring my shoulders the way my late husband used to when he faced something unbearable. "I'm not asking for therapy. I'm asking for the truth. And I won't stop until I get it." His smile never faltered, but his eyes hardened. "Mrs. Lawson, please understand, we're only here to ensure your safety." "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'll find it myself." I snapped and turned on my heel before he could reply. Out in the corridor, my legs felt like water. My chest burned with fear, but beneath it, something fiercer pulsed anger. Passengers streamed past me laughing, sipping cocktails. None of them knew that beneath the polished veneer, this ship carried secrets in its belly. My secrets. Daniel's secrets. And perhaps the staff's complicity. I wandered up to the deck, the open sky a shock after the suffocating office. The sea spread endless horizon, glowing pale in the late afternoon light. I gripped the railing, staring out. For a long moment, I wanted nothing more than to let the waves take me to dissolve into the blue and be done with it. But Ruth's words echoed in my head. "Not borrowed, taken, unless you fight for it back." I closed my eyes and breathed deep, letting the salt air sting my lungs. The grief was still there, the betrayal like a knife lodged too deep to pull out. But beneath it, something new surged, the instinct I thought I had lost when my husband died, the part of me that had kept food on the table, and Daniel clothed when we had nothing. Resolve. I straightened slowly, shoulders back. If Daniel thought I would simply crumble, he was wrong. If the ship's doctor thought he could smile me into silence, he was wrong too. I wasn't powerless. I still had my voice, I still had my wits, and I still had Ruth. I turned from the railing, a plan not yet formed, but beating inside me like a second heart. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I knew one thing for certain: I would not die quietly in this floating prison. Ruth knocked again that evening, soft but certain, as if she already knew I would answer. I let her in without a word. My cabin smelled faintly of salt and stale fear, the untouched wine still gleaming on the desk like a dare. She set a small notebook down on the table. "You're going to need this," she said. I frowned. "A notebook." Her expression was grave. "Evidence. You write everything down, dates, times, who said what you saw. If anyone tries to silence you, the written word becomes your shield." I sank into the chair, touching the notebook like it might burn me. "You sound practiced." Ruth hesitated, then pulled the second chair close and sat. Her voice was lower this time, softer, as though she were pulling up the past like something fragile. "My brother did it to me," she said simply. I blinked. "Did what?" "Locked me away," she whispered. "Said it was for my health, that I needed supervision. In reality, he wanted the house, my pension, everything." She pressed her lips together. "I thought family would protect me. I thought blood meant loyalty. But when money enters the picture, blood can turn to poison." Her words rang inside me like a cruel bell. "I stayed in that facility for 6 months," she continued. "I lost weight, lost my savings, lost my dignity. Until one day, a nurse slipped me a pen and paper. She said, 'Write it down, make them see you.' So I did. I recorded everything: meals, withheld visits, denied papers I never signed. That notebook got me a lawyer. That lawyer got me out." She placed her hand on mine. "Don't underestimate the power of documenting betrayal. It's the only thing they can't take away once it's written." Tears blurred my eyes. "I can't believe this. I raised my son. I gave him everything. And now Ruth squeezed my fingers. That's why it hurts so much. They take what you've given and twist it into leverage." I nodded weakly, opening the notebook. The blank lines stared back at me, terrifying and liberating all at once. I wrote the first entry with shaky hands. Day 3, pills missing, doctor denies record, guest services confirm one-way ticket. Claire reads messages, doesn't reply. The act of writing steadied me. It was as though I had carved truth into stone. For the first time since boarding, I felt less like prey and more like a witness. Ruth watched me silently, then leaned back. "Good. Keep it close. And never let anyone see it who doesn't earn your trust." I glanced at her. "Why are you helping me?" Her eyes softened. "Because no one helped me when it was my turn. And because I see something in you, a woman who isn't done yet." I swallowed the lump in my throat, sharp. "But what can I do? Daniel's not here. He's safe on land. I'm the one stranded." "You're not powerless," Ruth said firmly. "You still have a voice. You still have observation. Start small. Save receipts. Note who brings what to your door. Notice if staff hesitate or avoid. A pattern will emerge." I nodded slowly. She was right. Yesterday I had begged the doctor. Today I would record him. Tomorrow perhaps I would expose him. I looked at the untouched wine again. "He thought I'd drink that." "Of course he did," Ruth murmured. A tired woman, lonely, a glass of comfort after a hard day. Convenient if she didn't wake up. My stomach twisted. "You really think they'd go that far?" She met my eyes without blinking. "Yes." Silence stretched between us, filled only by the low groan of the ship shifting against the waves. I closed the notebook gently. "Then I'll be ready." Ruth smiled faintly. "That's the spirit. Write, watch, wait. And when the moment comes, speak where everyone can hear." I thought of the ballroom dinner announcement, the captain's gala nights, the ship's endless appetite for spectacle. Perhaps one day soon I would stand in a room full of strangers and tell them everything. Not whispers in a hallway, not half-truths behind polite smiles, but the whole story out loud. For now I would write. For now I would remember. For now I would sharpen the blade of truth in silence. I held Ruth's gaze, my voice steadier than it had been in days. "I won't go quietly." Her answering smile was the first real one I'd seen on her face. "Good. That's how women like us survive." I was halfway through my third notebook entry when the sound came, a faint whisper scratch at the door. At first I thought it was just the ship settling the endless creaks and groans of metal pressed by waves. But then came a soft shuffle, the slide of paper against carpet. I froze. Slowly I set my pen down. The silence pressed heavy around me. With shaking hands I rose and stepped toward the door. On the floor just inside lay an envelope, plain white, no markings. My heart pounded. I crouched staring at it like it might bite. No one had knocked, no one had spoken, just the quiet offering of something that should never have been mine. I picked it up. The paper crackled under my fingers. I carried it back to the desk and sat forcing myself to breathe as I slid a finger beneath the flap. Inside was a single sheet, official-looking, typed with a cruise line header at the top. My eyes skimmed the words and stopped dead at the block of text near the bottom. I, Margaret Lawson, hereby consent to the ship's medical staff providing any and all treatments, including but not limited to emergency interventions, without limitation or liability. And below it, my signature. My knees went weak. I dropped into the chair, clutching the page, my name, my handwriting, only it wasn't. I had never signed this. A tremor rippled through me so sharp my teeth knocked together. Someone had forged my consent. Someone had placed it beneath my door without a word, as if daring me to notice. I whispered into the silence, "Oh my God." Ruth knocked gently, as if she sensed my panic even through the walls. I scrambled to open the door, the paper clutched in my fist. She took one look at my face and hurried inside. "What happened?" Wordlessly, I handed her the sheet. She read quickly, her jaw tightening. "They're covering themselves. If something happens to you, this makes it look like you agreed." I swallowed hard. "But that's not my signature. That doesn't matter if no one asks. If you collapse, if you don't wake up, who will question a piece of paper? This ship sails with thousands of passengers. You'd just be one more case file." I pressed a hand to my mouth. He planned this far. Ruth folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. "This is your weapon now. Evidence. Keep it safe." Tears pricked my eyes. "He's my son. Why would he?" "Because money screams louder than love," Ruth said bitterly. "And because he thinks you're powerless out here." I sat shaking the paper, burning in my hands. I wanted to scream, to rip it apart, but instead I tucked it into the notebook, pressing it flat between the pages. If I destroyed it, the proof would vanish. If I kept it, maybe, just maybe, someone would believe me. Ruth touched my arm gently. "This is the point where you decide who you are. Victim or witness. They expect you to fold. Don't." Her words lit a spark inside me. Terrifying, yes, but also clarifying. If they had taken the risk of forging my signature, then my life truly balanced on the edge. I stood slowly, my hands steadier than I expected. "I'll keep the paper. I'll keep writing. And when the time comes, I'll show everyone." Ruth nodded. "Good. But until then, you keep quiet. Let them think you're still afraid. That's when they make mistakes." The envelope crackled as I slid it deeper into the notebook, hidden among my words. The ship's hum seemed louder now, the air thicker, as if the walls themselves knew I had crossed a line. I glanced at the untouched wine still on the desk, the red liquid gleaming in the lamp's glow. For the first time, I didn't just fear it, I felt certain it had been meant for me. I turned back to Ruth, my voice low but hard. "They won't silence me." She met my eyes and gave the smallest, fiercest smile. "Then you might just survive." The phone buzzed late in the evening just as I was finishing another entry in the notebook. My hand jerked, scrawling ink across the page. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The caller ID lit up with Claire's name. My heart leapt and crashed at once. I snatched the phone up, pressing it hard to my ear. "Claire." A pause, the faint sound of breathing. Then her voice thin, shaky. "Maggie." Relief flooded me, but it tangled instantly with suspicion. "Claire. Thank God. I've been calling you. Why haven't you—" "Don't," she cut in. Her whisper was sharp, panicked. "Don't say too much. He checks my phone." I froze. The air left my lungs. "Claire, please. I need to know what's happening. Did Daniel—" "I can't," she whispered. "Just listen. Stay alert. Watch everything. Don't trust anyone." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." And then the line went dead. I stared at the dark screen, my own reflection warped in the glass. The words clanged in my head. "He checks my phone. Stay alert. Don't trust anyone." My hands shook as I set the phone down. Ruth, who had been sitting quietly across from me, reading one of her endless paperbacks, looked up sharply at my expression. "What is it?" "It was Claire," I whispered. She said he checks her phone. She told me to stay alert." And then she hung up. Ruth's mouth tightened. "So she knows. She's complicit at the very least." No. I shook my head, fighting tears. No, she sounded afraid. She's trapped too. Ruth closed her book slowly. Fear doesn't absolve silence. Her words cut, but I couldn't deny the truth of them. Claire knew something, maybe everything. And she had chosen silence until now, when fear had cracked her open just enough to send a warning. I paced the cabin, clutching my arms around myself. He checks her phone. That means he doesn't trust her either. He's watching her. Ruth nodded grimly. And if he's watching her, he's watching you too, even from a distance. He's covered his bases. You're isolated here, and she's muzzled at home. The walls pressed tighter. The notebook on the desk seemed to glow faintly, my only defense against the invisible net tightening around me. My mind spun with memories of Claire. Her hands always clasped, her smile thin, her glances away when Daniel spoke too firmly. I had mistaken it for shyness, for submission. Now I wondered if it had been guilt or fear. I pressed a hand against my forehead, whispering, "Why didn't she tell me sooner? Why let me walk onto this ship?" Ruth's voice was gentle, almost pitying. Because fear can chain people worse than iron. She may want to protect you, but protecting herself comes first. The words made me ache. I sat back down, forcing my breath to steady. Then I'll protect myself. I opened the notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote it down, Day 4. Claire called. "Warned me, stay alert," said Daniel checks her phone. Then she hung up. The words steadied me again, carving truth into permanence. Ruth watched me, her eyes approving. "Good. Every crack in their facade is another weapon for you. Keep gathering. Keep building." The cabin phone on the wall buzzed suddenly, startling me so badly the pen rolled from my hand. I snatched the receiver, my voice trembling. "Hello, dead air." Then a click. I slammed it back onto the hook, heart racing. "Wrong number," Ruth asked quietly. "No," I whispered. That was a warning. The silence between us stretched long, filled only by the low thrum of the engines. I finally looked up, meeting Ruth's steady gaze. My voice was low, fierce. "If Daniel thinks I'll stay quiet, he's wrong. If Claire thinks her warning will keep me passive, she's wrong too. I won't just watch. I'll act." Ruth nodded once, slow and certain. "Then you're ready for the next step." I didn't know yet what that next step was, but I knew this silence had been broken. The circle was widening, and the fight for my life was no longer hidden, it had begun. The phone buzzed again the next morning. Not the mobile this time, the cabin phone mounted on the wall, its dull beige plastic humming with urgency. For a long moment I simply stared at it, my stomach twisting. When I finally lifted the receiver, my hands were already trembling. "Mom." The voice came smooth, warm, the same voice that had read me bedtime stories once, that had shouted from soccer fields, that had asked me for money more times than I could count. My son's voice, Daniel. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the edge of the desk. "Daniel," I whispered. "Relax, Mom," he said lightly. "I told you this trip was for you, to rest, to enjoy yourself." I closed my eyes, bile rising in my throat. "Where are my pills?" A pause, a faint sigh. "Always so dramatic. You worry too much." My voice sharpened. "Don't play games with me. They were in my suitcase. You zipped it yourself." His chuckle slid through the line, low and casual. "Maybe you misplaced them. Maybe it's just time to let go of some things." I pressed my hand against my chest, steadying the thud of my heart. Time to let go. "Daniel, do you even hear yourself? You sent me here without a way back. Guest services told me. One-way ticket. What did you do?" He didn't deny it. He didn't even hesitate. "You always said you wanted an adventure. Consider this one last voyage." Tears burned my eyes, but fury sharpened my voice. "You're my son." "Yes," he said softly, almost tender. "And that's why I know what's best. You've been tired for so long, Mom. Lonely. This way, everything gets easier." My breath caught the truth slamming into me like a wave. "You want me gone." Silence on the line, heavy and damning. Finally, his voice came low, steady, chilling. "It's not personal. It's practical." I nearly dropped the phone. The room blurred my vision, swimming with tears. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I gave you everything. I know," he said simply, "and I'll remember that. Always. The line clicked. Dead. I stood frozen, the receiver still pressed to my ear long after the silence settled. My son. My only child. His voice was calm, his words deliberate. He hadn't stumbled. He hadn't begged forgiveness. He had spoken like a man finalizing a business deal. The fury inside me boiled over. I slammed the receiver down so hard it rattled against the cradle. My hands shook, but this time not from fear. Ruth pushed open the door without knocking. She must have heard the shouting. One look at my face and she paled. It was him, wasn't it? I nodded, my throat raw. He didn't even deny it. He as good as told me I wasn't coming back. Her jaw tightened. Then it's time to stop waiting. Time to make noise. I sat heavily on the bed, the fury quivering in my limbs. Noise tell people, staff passengers, anyone who'll listen. Whispered suspicions don't save lives. Evidence shouted does. I thought of the notebook hidden under the pillow of the forged form of Claire's warning. My son wanted me erased, but I was still here, and I had a voice. I lifted my head slowly, the fire in my chest steady now. Then I'll make them hear me. Ruth's eyes gleamed with approval. Good. Start tonight. The gala dinner. Full of witnesses. Perfect stage. The thought terrified me. To stand there surrounded by strangers, to expose my son's betrayal in public. But it was also the only way left. Silence had nearly killed me already. Speaking might save me. I clenched my fists, whispering the vow to myself as much as to Ruth. He won't bury me in silence, not my son, not anyone. The hours after Daniel's call passed like a storm trapped beneath my skin. His voice still echoed in my ears, calm, smooth, final. It's not personal. It's practical. I sat at the tiny desk staring at the notebook until the words blurred. Ruth had pulled the chair closer, her presence solid as a lighthouse in fog. You heard him yourself, she said quietly. He's not hiding it anymore. That means he thinks he's already won. I clenched my fists in my lap. Then he underestimates me. Ruth's mouth curved faintly, not quite a smile, but something close. That's the spirit. We use the gala dinner. People. Witnesses. If you speak in front of 100 passengers, they can't bury the truth quietly. My pulse pounded at the thought. To stand before strangers and reveal my own son's betrayal, it felt unbearable, and yet silence was worse. I nodded slowly. What do I say? How do I make them listen? Keep it simple, Ruth advised. Show them the forged form. Tell them about the missing medication, the one-way ticket, the call from your son. Speak with certainty. Even doubt in one person's mind could be enough to stop them from acting against you. I drew a shaky breath. And if they don't believe me? Her eyes darkened. Then you survive anyway, with or without their help. The ship rocked gently beneath us, the hum of engines like a pulse underfoot. I felt both steadied and suffocated by it. Later, when Ruth left for her own cabin, I stayed behind, unable to sleep. The cabin walls pressed too tight, the silence too loud. I needed air. I walked the corridors, slippers whispering against the carpet. Most of the passengers were at the late show in the theater. The hallways felt abandoned. My footsteps echoed back at me. As I turned a corner near the service stairwell, I heard voices. I froze, leaning into the shadow of an alcove. 2 crew members stood near a half-open door, their uniforms crisp, their voices low but distinct. The Lawson woman, one murmured. My blood ran cold. The other chuckled softly. Protocols in place. Captain signed off. Medical staff briefed. Good, the first replied. Last thing we need is complications mid-Atlantic. I pressed a hand to my mouth, my breath too loud in the silence. The second voice dropped further. He said she won't last the week. Easier for everyone that way. They laughed then, casual, careless, before their footsteps retreated down the stairwell. I stayed frozen, my back pressed to the wall, until the echo of their shoes vanished. My chest heaved, my heart hammering against my ribs. Protocol. Signed off. She won't last the week. I stumbled back toward my cabin, each step heavier than the last. By the time I locked the door behind me, my legs trembled so badly I could hardly stand. Ruth's knock came minutes later. She must have seen my face through the peephole because she pushed inside without waiting. What happened? I could barely speak. The crew. I heard them. They called it protocol, said I wouldn't last the week. Her expression tightened, her jaw set hard. Then it's bigger than we thought. Not just Daniel. The ship is in on it. I collapsed into the chair, my whole body shaking. The captain, the doctor, everyone. They've already decided. Ruth knelt beside me, gripping my hands. That's why the gala matters more than ever. If you make this public, they can't move quietly. They'll be forced to answer. Exposure is your only shield. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. He's my son, Ruth. My only son. And he's handed me over like cargo. Her eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. Then don't let them deliver you. You've come too far to go quietly. I wiped my face, pulling the notebook toward me with trembling hands. I wrote it down, every word, crew. Protocol. Captain signed off, said I won't last the week. The ink smeared where my tears fell, but the truth was still legible, carved in black lines that no one could erase. I lifted my head, my voice hoarse but steady. Tomorrow night at that dinner I'll speak. I'll show them. And if they still try to bury me, I swallowed, meeting Ruth's unwavering gaze, then at least I won't have gone silent. Ruth nodded, her hand tightening on mine. That's all that matters. Your voice, your truth. Let it burn brighter than their lies. The ship groaned low in the dark, as if warning me of the fight to come. The ballroom glittered like a jeweled cage. Chandeliers swung gently with the motion of the ship, casting golden light over white tablecloths and crystal glasses. The air was thick with perfume and laughter, the clink of silverware, the polished notes of a string quartet playing near the dais. I sat at a round table near the center, my pulse pounding so loudly I could barely hear the music. Ruth sat beside me, her hand resting lightly over mine under the tablecloth. "Remember," she whispered. "Simple, direct. Truth doesn't need embellishment." I nodded, though my throat felt tight, my stomach a knot. The forged form was folded inside my notebook, tucked against my chest like armor. The captain rose to make a toast, his uniform gleaming. His smile carried easy charm as he spoke of voyages and horizons of togetherness at sea. The crowd applauded, glasses lifted. My heart hammered harder. When he stepped back, I pushed my chair away. The scrape of it against the polished floor seemed louder than the music. Heads turned. My legs shook, but I forced myself to stand tall. "I need to speak," I said, my voice unsteady at first, then firmer. "Please, everyone listen." The music faltered. Murmurs rippled. The captain's smile froze a fraction too tight. I took a breath that felt like fire in my lungs. "My name is Margaret Lawson. 3 days ago I boarded this ship believing it was a gift from my son. But it wasn't a gift. It was a trap." Gasps rose from nearby tables. A man chuckled nervously as if waiting for a punchline. I pulled the envelope from my notebook and held it high. I packed my medication myself. When I arrived, it was gone. I begged the doctor for help. He told me I had no record. He lied. The captain shifted slightly, his jaw tense. I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. Then this appeared beneath my door. A consent form with my forged signature, authorizing treatments I never agreed to, proof they are preparing for me not to survive this voyage. A collective murmur spread sharper now. People leaned forward, whispers darting like sparks. I forced my voice to rise above them, and I heard your crew speaking. They called it protocol. They said the captain signed off. They said I wouldn't last the week. The captain's hand tightened on the podium. "Mrs. Lawson," he began, but I cut him off. "My son Daniel Lawson sent me here. He admitted on the phone that this was no vacation. He said, 'It's not personal, it's practical.'" My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "He arranged this voyage as my exile, a one-way trip, with your help." The room erupted, gasps, shouts, chairs scraping. Some faces turned horrified, others skeptical, some simply entertained as though it were theater. But enough listened. Enough saw the paper shaking in my hands, the tears streaking my face, the tremor of my voice too raw to be performance. The captain stepped forward, his voice louder, now firm. "Mrs. Lawson, please. You are distressed. This is not the place. This is the only place," I cried, my voice breaking into a sob. "You've silenced me in the halls, in the medical office, in my cabin. Here in front of witnesses, you cannot erase me." A woman at another table stood suddenly. "She's right. I saw her near the infirmary 2 days ago." She looked pale as a ghost. They brushed her off. Others began murmuring agreement, doubt spreading across the glittering room like a stain. The captain's mask cracked. His voice sharpened. "Sit down, Mrs. Lawson." I shook my head violently, clutching the forged form to my chest. "No, I will not sit. Not while you and my son have signed away my life." The quartet had stopped playing entirely. The room was alive with whispers, outrage, disbelief. Ruth rose slowly beside me, her voice carrying across the room. I was her witness. I saw the missing medication. I saw the form. She is not lying. The air snapped taut. The captain's face flushed red, his jaw locked. For a heartbeat, the entire room hung on the balance, my voice against his authority, truth against power. And for the first time I believed I could win. The ballroom was no longer music and laughter. It was chaos. Passengers rose from their seats, voices overlapping shock, anger, disbelief. Some rushed toward me with questions. Others pulled out phones, snapping photos of the form trembling in my hand. The air that had once smelled of perfume now felt heavy with sweat and tension. The captain's voice boomed across the microphone, desperate for control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. This guest is confused." "I am not confused." My voice cracked but carried. "I am a mother betrayed. My son sent me here to die, and this ship agreed to it." The words cut through the noise. Silence rippled, fragile but real. The forged form shook in my grasp as I held it high. "Here is the proof. My signature faked. My pills gone. My ticket one way. Ask yourselves, why would I invent this? Why would a mother accuse her own child if it weren't true?" Murmurs broke out again, but this time they bent toward me. Doubt had cracked the surface of the captain's authority. Ruth stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "I saw it too. I stood with her. She is not alone." That tipped the balance. A man in the back shouted, "Show us the paper." Others echoed him. Phones flashed as I unfolded it fully, letting the signatures and seals glint beneath the chandeliers. The captain's face tightened, his smile gone. He glanced toward the staff at the doors, but too many eyes were watching now, too many witnesses. And then, as if fate itself demanded an answer, the ballroom doors swung open. A young crewman entered, his expression stricken. He held a tablet in his hands, his voice shaking. "Captain, there's been an inquiry from shore, from Lisbon authorities. They've received a complaint about a passenger named Margaret Lawson." Gasps erupted. My knees nearly buckled. Someone on land knew. Claire. The captain tried to seize the tablet, but the boy pulled back frightened. The murmurs swelled into shouts, demands for answers, for explanations. The captain's control slipped further with every second. I straightened, tears drying on my face. "You cannot silence me anymore. Everyone here has heard the truth. If anything happens to me now, you'll all know who's responsible." For a moment, everything hung suspended. The glittering lights, the restless crowd, the captain's furious glare. Then the dam broke. Passengers surged toward me, not with malice, but with protection, voices rising in outrage at the officers, at the crew. The captain barked orders, but the noise drowned him out. Cameras caught every flicker of panic on his face. The lie could no longer be contained. Ruth gripped my hand, her palm warm and strong. "You did it," she whispered. "You tore it open." The next days blurred. Questioning. Statements. Lisbon authorities boarding at port, pulling staff aside. My forged form sealed in an evidence bag. My name cleared in the eyes of strangers who had witnessed the public unraveling of a crime hidden in plain sight. And then the silence, the ship docked, the passengers dispersing my feet, stepping onto solid ground with a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Claire was waiting, her eyes red, her face, pale hands trembling as she reached for me. "I tried," she whispered. "I called the authorities. I sent them what I could. I couldn't stop him, Maggie." "I'm so sorry." I searched her face, every tremor, every tear. For a moment I wanted to collapse into her arms, to forgive her silence, to believe we could be family again. But the wound was too raw. I pulled my hand free gently. "You let me walk into it. You knew." She flinched, tears spilling. "I was afraid." "So was I said softly. But I still spoke. Her sobs followed me as I turned away. Days later, back in my own kitchen, I placed the notebook on the table. Its pages were filled with ink and fear, with dates and names, with evidence no one could deny. It was proof of betrayal, but also of survival. The house was quiet, too quiet. Daniel's presence lingered in the framed photographs, in the worn sofa cushions, in every memory of a boy I had once cradled, once trusted, once believed would never hurt me. That boy was gone, or maybe he had never been who I thought. I touched the notebook cover, whispering into the stillness. You tried to erase me, Daniel. But I wrote myself back. Outside, the world moved on. Neighbors mowing lawns, children shouting on bicycles. Life continued ordinary and indifferent. I sat in the silence, scarred, but breathing the weight of betrayal heavy, but the fire of defiance still burning. I was not gone, and I would not go quietly.